Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Canterbury Residents Group live interviews with the party political candidates for Canterbury, those who want to be your MP. Claire is representing the Liberal Democrat Party, and throughout this live stream, I'm going to be asking your questions to Claire in two parts. So the first part will be 7 questions that Claire and all the other candidates have already seen. And we'll go through those 7 questions, and that will give you an opportunity to compare each candidate's answers as we go. And then part 2, we're going to be asking your questions that have come in live on the live stream in the comments below. So if you think of a question as we're going along, pop it in the comments box. We won't have time to ask them all, but we'll try and get through as many as we can. So let's start with one of the questions that was posted in the residents group. Jim Titheridge posted, our local council budget here in Canterbury has been cut to the bone. Will we see a reversal of this policy in the next government if your party get into power?
Yes, I've seen this locally across the country, and it's very, very hard for local councils, either county, borough or district. And the Conservative government have caused a huge problem for local people as a result. The county council and the borough councils have big issues like potholes, infrastructure problems, and what the Liberal Democrats would do is that they would use what we're calling our Remain bonus, which if we stay in Europe, our economy will go up by 1.9%, which will generate a 50 billion Remains bonus. And we would intend to use that bonus on things like infrastructure, potholes, even schools, helping stuff for the NHS and things like that. And that would go into our local government. Certainly locally where we are, we've had really very big problems, and it causes the residents to have great issues. And for instance, just reporting on the local roads, potholes, people damage their cars, and the councils aren't in a position to actually be able to pay them back, even though they are responsible. But it all comes back to the Conservative government, I'm afraid.
And so the plan for your party is essentially to stop Brexit, and with the money that you think will save, but by stopping Brexit, that will go back into local issues, into local government spending.
Yes, we would also devolve a lot of government, so the local authorities would have more power to do what they want to do locally, and we're seeing that happening anyway, and finding clever ways of making income. So yes, that's basically the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question that came in was from Amanda Bates, and this is a really hot topic in Canterbury. We have a very engaged population that spend a lot of time looking at what the council are planning on doing. And so the question is, do you support the Save Windsheep Water Meadows campaign? And please, can you expand on your environmental policies as well?
Yes, well, of course I support it. It's ridiculous to try and build on there. It floods. I think it flooded last week. It's absolutely crazy. There is a car park there already, and I believe that we should be probably making that multi-storey. I do think that the park and ride is a very, very good idea because of all the very small roads through Canterbury and the lack of public transport. But we have to look after our open spaces, and the Hambrook Marshes are a beautiful piece of land that really, really shouldn't be damaged by local government. And it's outrageous to think that now that they would even consider doing that. And I know that there's going to judicial review, and people are not wasting, but having to spend money to actually block this ridiculous idea by the local government. Environmental, well, I could go on. I am the Environment Cabinet member for Mole Valley. And we took over, the Liberal Democrats took over the administration in May. And the first thing we did, like a lot of other councils, was to declare a climate emergency. Now, councils are approaching this in all sorts of different ways. I'm in the process of trying to earmark £200,000 to put towards the things that we can do to mitigate climate change in my area. But I believe that the local council has only put £9,000 towards this, which seems appalling. I know we've just discussed lack of money, but all the councils are in the same position. And I'm afraid if we don't put money into these things, we're not going to have a council or a land or a planet to actually look after. So money shouldn't be an object, you know.
Sure. Obviously, the Conservative Council in Canterbury would argue that Park and Ride needs more spaces. I think you agree that it's a good service. Do you know of any other solutions apart from building more Park and Ride plans? Obviously not in that location, but...
Right. Well, we are about to start an investigation into smart travel, because obviously one of the problems is that everybody is driving into Canterbury. And we've got very, very small roads here, and it's difficult to park in Canterbury. Therefore, a Park and Ride is a very good idea. But if you actually increase your infrastructure and invest and maybe have a ring road around, you're going to get the cars away from the centre, and encourage cycling and walking. And smart travel is you have an app. It's a bit like an Uber. We're going to experiment with people going to work in the morning and then being able to call the app in the evening, to get home. We're going to try it in different rural areas, which will clear the roads because people will share a taxi or a minibus.
Is this app in existence right now?
We're about to experiment. But there is one in Sutton already. There's a bus, I think it's called Go Sutton. And you literally go on your app. It has a set route. And it goes around all the time, and you just look on your app and you can actually call it to go onto your part of that route. It's
quite innovative ideas.
Yes.
So that's the solution.
I think that would really help Canterbury. But I want to talk a little bit more about climate issues, if you don't mind. One of the county councillors, who's a Liberal Democrat, is trying to do a great thing, which is to put in air filters around Canterbury, which is terribly important. There are over 40,000 deaths of people dying of lung problems in the country, and that's going up all the time. Our roads are absolutely filthy. These air filters can clean the air around 50 metres, so they don't do a massive area, but if you can put them in great places like outside certain schools.
Are they expensive?
I think they're roughly 9,000 a unit. Okay. So yes, but relatively speaking, thinking about the good it does, I think it's money well spent. Mm-hmm. But again, going on about climate change, we need to approach this from the bottom up and from up down. The central government at the moment are complete hypocrites, in my opinion, because they have declared a climate emergency, but they're still allowing fracking and acid stimulation, drilling, etc., which is incredibly dangerous. It can get into the water supply, and yet they say there's a climate emergency. I'm locally trying to talk to my county environment officer, councillor, who's my counterpart. I'm district, he's county, to try and get him to ban this in Surrey. Okay. But I think it should be coming from the central government. We need to be actually carrying on and living up to the Paris Agreement. I mean, the states aren't doing that. Canada and Australia are not actually cutting their emissions. We're always hearing every week how much the ice flow is increasing.
And in Canterbury, you think we're not doing enough?
Not enough. No one is doing enough. And I mean, I'm not doing enough, and yet I'm an enthusiast. And it's actually very difficult because we're still fighting against people who they just don't want to put the money in it. But I have 4 children, and I'm worried about them having my grandchildren.
Sure. So. Okay. We've had another question that was posted from Helena Godman, and Helena asks, what are you going to do to reopen the Kent and Canterbury accident and emergency? And what are your other thoughts on healthcare in Kent? So have you been to the hospital?
Yes, I have. Yes, of course. Well, you drive up there and it doesn't look particularly attractive for a start, but it's what's going on inside at the moment, and I think it's tragic that the accident and emergency is taken away from there. It seems to me personally, a no-brainer that the KNC should be the centre of excellence because of the placing it is in East Kent. Canterbury has 40,000 university students. We have thousands of visitors to the city because it's such a beautiful place to visit. And a very, very high proportion of people over 70 who live in the area. Therefore, a local hospital is imperative. If you have a stroke at the moment, you don't know where you're going to end up. You could be sent to Ashford or Margate. There isn't enough happening locally, and I really do think that we should I know that local people have been fighting for it. One of the things that Rosie says very often when we're in Hustings is that she's been fighting for it for 2.5 years. Well, I've fought for things and I've saved things, and it's taken a few months. Now, okay, it's a whole hospital, but if you do things piecemeal, right, let's work on this department, or let's do this, let's try and get this money. I think that's the way to approach it. It is hard. You have to be dedicated, and yes, in this financial climate, it is very, very difficult. But I also believe that it should stay. We need to invest in that particular site. Because of what I mentioned before about the infrastructure. It takes hours to get to Ashford or Margate, or even go to the places outside our area.
One thing that's been said is that reopening the accident and emergency in Canterbury will be at the loss for other cities in Kent and other places in Kent, and that actually the health organisations say that a place like Kent does only need just 1 or 2 accident emergencies.
Yes. Well, I think you've got me on the hop slightly, but I think that would be all right if the road network was okay and ambulances could get to these A&Es. But at the moment, with all the buildings that we're all supposed to be doing in our area, these roads are going to get more and more congested. It's going to actually get worse. I don't like to be a pessimist. I'm always an optimist. But these roads are going to get worse, and something has to be done. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could have an A&E in each city? Wouldn't that be all town? Yeah.
And is the proposed funding for things like extra NHS spending, is that coming from the Brexit bonus, as you put it?
No. The Liberal Democrats would actually put a penny in the pound on income tax, and that would raise £5 billion a year to put into the NHS, social care and mental health. And that would be ring-fenced. It wouldn't go anywhere else. This is one of the things that I found about this election. There are a lot of fairy tales being told here. Now, the Liberal Democrats, we're in the middle place politically, and in a way that's a very difficult position because we are we're not astounding people with great big fantasy projects. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty. That 5 billion will become 7 billion will become 35 billion in 5 years. We want to get back all the nurses and the doctors, and that's why we need to stay in the EU, because so many of them have gone back, left the country because they feel so unwelcome, and we really, really need those people. I know a lot of them.
Thank you very much for that answer. So we've had another question come in earlier on in the week from Kerry Miles. And Kerry says, carers who look after their loved ones with severe disabilities and illnesses are paid £66 a week. Would you agree that £66 a week is impossible to live on and unacceptable in this modern age? And if so, where would you have that amount? And again, where would that money come from?
I think it's disgraceful that we are supposed to be the 5th richest country. We're probably going down that bit, but in the world, it is absolutely outrageous. My sister was a carer, and it can be 24/7, and it's an exhausting job, and they are saving this country so much money. If you had to send a carer in to do that, it would be a lot more. Again, going back to the NHS and the penny in the pound, I believe that because we would be putting so much money into social care, I believe that we would be able to pay the carers far more. The other thing is that the carers allowance at the moment is only, before they get taxed, is only £123. It's got to go up to at least 150, and that's what we've put in our manifesto. These people are wonderful people, You know, we all want to care for our family, you know, but it's taking their time from probably their own family, their own physical strength and stamina. And I think we should be appreciating far, far more. And again, let's get that hypothecated tax, the penny in the pound, and actually be able to fund these. And not just go, oh, we're going to borrow this money and we're only going to tax the top 5%. You know, it's that is one of those fairy tales.
Is it right that we were even in a position where people have to do the vast majority of care for an ill relative, or should the money actually be found in the NHS's budget, not paying somebody when they might have a job?
Yes.
So if that's the case, again, is that not just stretching this NHS budget out even further?
It might be. I mean, I believe in community, and I do believe in people should be looking after each other. Don't get me wrong, but if it's taking the time, exhausting somebody. I mean, we've got some young carers who, what we would offer them is things like extra benefits like free bus travel and membership to gyms. Now that sounds crazy, but it's not. We need to help their well-being.
Sounds expensive, but
I think if they're not either not getting any money at all, or only £66, or even only below the £125 allowance, it is terrible. I mean, yes, you say it will stretch it, but we've got to find a way of doing it. And these people are treasures in our society. And maybe we also should be talking to the rest of the community to help those people as well, not just the state.
Another question then from Neil Fisher this time. Neil says, nothing has been done to prevent a repeat of the banking crisis in 9 years. How will your party address the loopholes previously exploited? So the banking crisis caused recession, caused austerity, and yet the holes that the loopholes have not yet been tightened, and the banks are still. What are the Liberal Democrats' plans for fixing that situation?
Well, that's not quite correct, because under Vince Cable there was the Vickers report, which was an independent commission on banking, and that's where they separated retail banking and investment banking. I think they called it the casino banking, so that they wouldn't
high rollers, big funds being invested,
so they wouldn't affect each other. And which gives a bit of security to banks. But the other thing that they talked about is that banks should have enough money, enough funds in their coffers for their loans and for the investment, a fifth of them, so that if there is a crisis, they can actually pay people back. But this is something that definitely any government who takes over needs to have a look at, because the rules are not tight enough. But again, going back to climate and banking and stuff like that, one of the things that I'm very proud of being a Liberal Democrat is that we want to put $5 billion into a green investment bank, which would obviously be paying for investments that are green. It would encourage
lots of green themes running through a lot.
Definitely. Well, our manifesto is very, very green. This is actually partly why I joined the Liberal Democrats, because I felt I could do more as a Liberal Democrat than if I was just a green paper candidate, which unfortunately that's the situation. But we also would want to approach the major banks and create smaller banks that can actually be used for SMEs, small and medium-sized businesses, to get investment from, so that they wouldn't be let down by these big banks. So that we've thought about it from all sorts of different views, and we want to. A very, very big thing I want to tell you about, Ed, which you probably know about, is decarbonising capitalism. Basically, making sure that we invest in green things instead of just all this coal and oil and all those things. That is a massive subject, which I won't go into, but I hope that your watchers and followers will actually look at. It's a fascinating thing, okay. Because at the moment, the UK claims that we only create 1% of emissions. But actually, if you look at London in itself, it's 15%, because even it's a very small area, but the way we're investing in such disgusting things that it's actually 15% of the total of the world.
Okay. So green issues obviously very important on your agenda.
On
everybody's agenda this election for sure. But bringing it back down to ground level, literally to the streets. I have a question from Lynn Morris, who posted, "It breaks my heart to see so many people sleeping on the streets in Canterbury and now Whitstable, especially as temperatures plummet. What will your party do to help?" So I suppose what I'd say is that a lot of the Liberal Democrats' spending plans feature on these big items, things like the green issue, but on the ground, homeless charities, rough sleepers, that's a big issue too. That's going to need a lot of spending as well, isn't it?
Yes. 5,000 people a night spend their night on the streets. And last year, I think it's 761 people died on the streets. It's estimated this Christmas that 135,000 children will be homeless, which is, it's absolutely awful. The Conservatives have failed to repeal the Vagrancy Act, which means that people can just be arrested for living or sleeping rough, which is absolutely terrible. It's something like 130,000 people, 1,300 people were arrested or had up for that last year, which is absolutely terrible. They've also failed to stop the Section 21 of I can't remember what it's called. Unfair.
Is this tenancies? Is this,
no. Yes, it is. It's to be when you're thrown out. Yes.
So it's preventing people from being
unfairly thrown out.
And relatively by surprise.
Yes, absolutely. Now, a lot of this is caused by things like universal credit. We would put 6 billion into the universal credit to upgrade it, and we would only have 5 days turnover, so that would help. We also need to spend money on mental health and addiction, and that's a lot. A lot of these things are being caused by people losing where they're living because of the way they are living, and probation and parole. When people are coming out of prison, we would make sure that they've got somewhere to live and someone to see how they're doing. All these things add up, and it's you mentioned charities. Isn't it outrageous that we have to have things like Catching Lives and Porchlight locally?
Catching Lives, an amazing local charity.
Yes. But it's awful that in this society that we should have to have that. But this again is one of those things that needs to be tackled from all sorts of angles, and I know that Liberal Democrats would do that if we were in the government.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the first part with questions that have been sent in advance. So now we're going to move on to the questions that you are asking in the comments below. Like I said, there's plenty of them coming in, and we're not going to be able to have time to ask Claire all of them, but certainly we will choose the best ones we can. So I'm going to start a question here from Ben. Ben says, Rosie Duffield and yourself are both courting Remain voters. Why should people vote for you over her? I assume if they are a Remainer.
Well, let's hope they are a Remainer, because the Liberal Democrats have stuck by their determination to stay in Europe. We want to stop Brexit. And no matter what Rosie says, and I have said this to her face and at Hustings, no matter what she says, if you vote for Rosie, it's not a definite Remain vote, because her party and Jeremy Corbyn, in general, certainly Jeremy, is sitting on the fence, because they want to create a different deal with Europe and then take it to the people and have a people's vote. But that doesn't mean that people's vote, I would have rather have had a people's vote than this election. That's personal.
So you would rather a people's vote over?
Well, I think at the moment it's too. Going talking about an election versus a referendum, this is what is actually complicating things, because at the moment some people are fighting this or voting because of the Brexit issue, or many people are voting because of the NHS, in particular, from my observation, especially around here.
But the Liberal Democrat Party have positioned themselves as the Remain party,
and we are the strongest Remain. We are, I know there are other parties that are Remain, but actually in this constituency, the Remain vote is, as you said, maybe between Rosie and myself, but the Liberal Democrats are totally the Remain party. And the big thing about this is, I know that Tim backed out, but he backed out. His nomination papers had actually gone in, and 3 hours later he backed out. And I don't think that's a very good way of behaving. I couldn't behave that way. But
he backed out for what he felt were the right
but
reasons.
He must have known that beforehand. He must have had time to think about it. But that's his business. Over the last few years, especially since the referendum, the Liberal Democrats have had a huge amount of new supporters join. Now, if we just didn't put up a candidate, that is irresponsible. So we need to be loyal to our actual members in this area. This is a Remain area. The other thing is, in a way, I could be helping Rosie, because there are many, many Conservatives who want to Remain but would never, ever vote Labour. So,
I mean, that's the sort of the reverse of Nigel Farage's point that the Brexit Party are soaking up voters from who could never, Labour voters who could never vote Conservative. You feel that you could do almost the opposite.
And there was a bit of a survey done, and apparently it's like 2-1. I think because there are many Conservatives, because we're more in the middle. They can stomach the idea of voting for a Liberal Democrat, and they may have in the past, or they may have family who do, or But so I'm actually in the position to give them somewhere to vote. And just going back to anybody who really is a Remain voter, or who wants to even stop Brexit for other reasons, not necessarily to Remain, but just to stop this action that is going to go on for years. They should vote Liberal Democrat.
You mentioned the Liberal Democrat being a centre party. On Canterbury Residents Group, there's a general feeling that you get when you're looking at people's things that Brexit has become a left and right thing. So with Remain being a left-wing argument to some people, and Leave being more on the right. So as you seem to be positioning the Liberal Democrats in the centre, would you not agree that actually you're more to the left of centre?
I think that's a personal thing. I think some people might be, but I know very many Liberal Democrats who, the middle's quite big. It's apparently 67%.
Well, it's widened, hasn't it?
Yes, it has widened. And maybe we are the broadest church, I don't know. But 67% of the UK voters say that they are in the centre. So why is it the fact that the Liberal Democrats are not getting more footage, actually, even? We get interviewed far less. I mean, this is great. Obviously, you're giving all of us a chance. But as I said earlier, we're not making these massive claims and shocking people. We're not lying. We have been honest. I mean, look at the lies that have been said in this election. And Boris Johnson has misled the Queen. He said he wouldn't put a boundary or across the North Sea. I mean, this is going to it could very, very easily lead to the breakup of the UK, and I think that would be tragic. We've got family, we've got
which just to bring it back to this point. Those are very much the same positions that Rosie Duffield has. So,
but her party doesn't have them, and that is the difference. My party and I are unified. If you vote for me, you will get somebody in Parliament who definitely wants to Remain. And so does her party, and we will work together. And we have been working together to stop Brexit all these 3.5 years.
Okay, thank you. Another question is coming from Sam. Sam asks, how democratic is the Liberal Democrats' policy of unilaterally cancelling Brexit should they win this election? So, this one is coming up a lot in the residents group. You're the only party with the word Democrat in your title, which I think for a lot of people makes it quite an easy target and quite ironic as well. So revoking Article 50, is it simply ignoring a referendum?
Okay, so, right. I was at conference when this was announced. And I'm going to be very honest. When I heard that, I thought, oh my goodness.
When you heard that the manifesto was going to be revoked?
Yes, when I heard it. It was debated. And then there was a vote. So, and it was pretty unanimous, I think. It was definitely a lot. Obviously, it got passed. And at first, I thought, oh, that's a bit. How can we say that? But then I went away and thought about it. If you're a party in government, and you have a majority. And that's the only way we would do it. We would only do it if we have a majority, which doesn't look very likely at the moment. But if we got a majority, like any other government got a majority, we would be acting on our manifesto. And that is what parties would be doing on other topics that they had been voted through on. And that's the way I think that you can justify it. Yes, it does sound undemocratic.
So you see it as almost a second referendum because
well, yes. I mean, if that's how people were taking it, of course, if you vote Liberal Democrat, you're voting for Remain. You know that is our strongest policy. So we're upfront about it. So that's the way of justifying it. I understand why people go, that is like being a dictator, but it's not, because if you rationalise it the way I've just rationalised it, like. If you said in your manifesto that you were, and I think this might be quite a good idea, is we put 2% money towards defence. I think it might be a good idea for climate change that you, let's say, for want of a fairy tale, we put 10% of our GDR into climate mitigation, and we put that as a policy, and then we get voted in. That's what we would be expected to do. So actually, the revoking of Article 50 sort of goes with the Liberal Democrats, whatever you say.
Okay, thank you. Moving away from Brexit now, I'm sure we might end up back on it again at some point. A question in from Charlotte, who has asked, I think, a really important question. What help should the government be giving, and so therefore the Liberal Democrats, if they get into power, be giving to people with mental health issues?
Well, mental health is a huge issue. The very first thing the Liberal Democrats would do is we would treat it as the same as physical health. So all these long waiting lists, I mentioned a 14-week waiting list across the country, just to be diagnosed. And actually,
and that's specifically for the mental health.
That's just
issues.
For mental health, but that's an average, because I believe in this particular area, it's months, if not, it's something like 9 months. It's much higher, which I mean is astounding, absolutely astounding. We would employ many more professionals, doctors and teachers, lecturers, and police would be trained in mental health.
So you're seeing it as a very much a broad issue that needs to be dealt with in various departments.
It's unseen, isn't it? And mental health covers so many issues. I mean, we see kids with anorexia or cutting themselves. It is tragic. And we need people to be trained to see those telltale signs right at the beginning. And we must shorten all our waiting lists after that. Give many more talking therapies. More talking therapies are coming into our knowledge, and they are incredibly good. But also not using police cells. If somebody's had an awful crisis and they're thrown into a police cell, I mean that's a policy that we would stop.
And the funding for this increase in mental health provision.
That's costed,
penny, and it's from the...
Yes, it's from the penny and the pound, and that's 7 billion a year, the 35 billion in 5 years. Okay. So yes, I mean, yeah.
I have another question here from Ruth. Ruth asks, how can we trust the Liberal Democrats again after the 2010 coalition government with the Conservatives? So, as I said earlier, there's a lot of people that see the new lefts, new rights, and a lot of people who are or were Liberal Democrat supporters think back to 2010 and the coalition government. And eroded a lot of trust in the Liberal Democrats. And,
Yes.
and so how do you feel that you're going to be able to build that back up again as a party?
Well, as a party, personally, I wasn't a politician at the time. As a party, I think there have been quite a few apologies. I know that obviously the students' fees were a big issue, but it was since then the Conservatives have tripled those fees for university and put that 6% interest on the fees. And my daughter is one of those. She's 21 and she's at university now. So we are trying to undo that. We would put back the maintenance grant, and I think we need to take that further now. I think we should be actually giving bursaries.
It's quite a scar, isn't it?
It is a big scar,
and it's going to take a while.
It is, but it is quite a long time now. And I think the thing about Liberal Democrats is they aren't ashamed to apologise. I think there are other people in certain parties who have been very reluctant to apologise. And they have, and they think they've seen their ways. I know that our Joe Swinson, our leader, has apologised, and some of the austerity was definitely too much. But I don't think they saw it. It was a reaction to a massive global crisis. But
is it not going to be very difficult though to build that trust up again when the people who were involved in that coalition, in fact the party's leader herself, are still there? The Liberal Democrats have got a leader that was involved in that coalition. Doesn't that make that very difficult?
Well, it does and it doesn't, because she was also there when we did a lot of good things. I mean, we got tax raised, before you have to pay income tax. We planted a lot of trees. We started building houses. We had some very good marine reserves, and we had the Green Investment Bank there, which was thrown away by the Tories when we actually weren't in coalition. And I think if we hadn't been there, the Tories would have gone far faster into this austerity and far further. And I think we definitely held that back. It's very difficult because neither you nor I were actually physically there, so we weren't flies on the wall. But I know that Jo Swinson talks about how she was constantly trying to hold things back, as well as, yes, she did vote for some of those things. And with hindsight, I know that she does regret that. But I think at the time she meant well.
So you feel that time's a healer?
I think time is a healer. And then, it's 4 years now. So hopefully people can move on. And we learn from our mistakes. I mean, some philosophers say, that's the only way you do learn, by making mistakes. So, and I think the Liberal Democrats
It's just obviously the difficulty is that those mistakes had such dramatic impact on people's lives.
But I don't think they'd be repeated. And I think we have looked at those things, and we've put things in our manifesto to make sure those don't happen.
Okay. I've had another question in from Mel this time. So I know this one's come up a lot during hustings and other interviews you've done. Mel asks, how can you justify being an MP for Canterbury when you have never lived here and, in Mel's words, know very little about the area?
Okay. I completely understand that question, and I will answer it. One of the little phrases that I've used a few times is, some people say I've been parachuted in, but we know who are parachuted in. It's the heroes. It's people like the SAS who come and save the day. That's my sense of humour. But I'm
sure some Remain people in Canterbury will get that joke. But to the leavers of Canterbury, you're sort of, they might feel the opposite, and like you're parachuted in. To be behind.
No, but let me. When I became a councillor 5 years ago, I'd lived in my area for 20 years, and I thought I knew it. But actually, once you become a councillor or a politician in an area, you learn incredibly quickly about all those things. I used to I've got 4 children, and they used to say, nothing goes on where we live, Mum. And my goodness, so much goes on if you've got your ear to the ground, and it's actually quite easy to find things that are going on. I described the difference between Mole Valley, which is Dorking, and Leatherhead, which is Surrey. It's a home county, so it's not dissimilar. There's a lot of history there. I described Canterbury as Dorking or Mole Valley as being on steroids. So Canterbury's issues, many of them, are absolutely identical to the ones. Yes.
A lot of similarities.
So I have a lot of things that I can latch my information on. So I'm not just coming as somebody who doesn't know anything about anything. I know a lot about quite a lot, and I'm adding to that. And boy, have I been studying Canterbury and Whitstable and the villages.
Was Canterbury on your radar before?
Oh yes, of course. Yes.
You visited.
Oh, absolutely. But yes, it was a last minute thing, and I take it as a privilege and a compliment that they did parachute me in. They wanted somebody who could actually be reasonably strong and take over. And
what's the reaction been with the local Liberal Democrat Party?
I went to the. I was warned that I would get a bit of flack, was the word. And so when I went to the AGM, which was when I was introduced, I thought, whoa, what's going to happen? When I first walked in, people sort of knew who I was, and then, cut a long story short, I didn't know who had issues or who didn't. It was very well attended. That's one thing I would say, that locally, our local party, that they are intelligent and articulate people. And I stood up and I did my speech, and then it broke into, not wildly, but I mean, we broke into a conversation, because I said, I'm sure all of you want to actually ask me some questions now, and I know not all of you want me to be here. And there were quite a few comments, but eventually it calmed down. And I do think that once they realised where my heart is, because if you're passionate about something and you really, really want to make a difference, hopefully your character and your honesty will actually make people go, actually, okay, I think this person is honest, and I want to back them. So I am not going to claim that I completely changed everybody's point of view. There are probably people shouting at this right now, but in general, people thought, okay, she's a good representative, and let's back her. So okay. Yeah, there you go.
Not got too long left, just a couple more minutes. So I've just got one more question here on finance and things like that. So it's a really simple question. I'm sure I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you to expand on it. Do you agree with austerity?
Not now, no.
But at the time?
I don't think it. No, I think. Well, I think we had to rein our money in, definitely, at that time. I think everybody had to at that time. I am probably a little bit more into investing and putting things into society rather than taking it out. So that's that. I'm personally, as a single person, I would rather invest than just hold back. But we all have to hold back sometimes, and I've had to do that myself. So I'm giving you quite a blurred answer.
I understood the philosophy
yes,
of austerity and the need for it.
And I think it's impoverished far too many people. Far too many people.
I understand that you weren't a politician at the time, but your party were in coalition government. And were you a Liberal Democrat at the time? Were you as outspoken
I did support the Liberal Democrats, yes.
How deep the cuts were at the time?
Yes. Sorry, I did.
At the time, you were a Liberal Democrat. Yeah. They were in coalition government. They were part of making these deep cuts. Were you as outspoken then about the I wasn't in a position
to be as outspoken. I think I probably would have been. If I was in my position now, I think I would have been. I don't think the right decisions were always made, and I regret that we are still having to talk about that. So, okay. Yes.
That's about all we've got time for. I'm just going to ask you one more question. Have you enjoyed the election campaign so far?
So it has been a frenzy because I was brought in quickly. I had done a lot of studying. I'd had to pass sort of what we call sort of exams to be a prospective parliamentary candidate. I have enjoyed it. It's been quite scary because I have had to learn a huge amount very, very quickly. But I have really taken on that challenge, and I do absolutely love this area. And I really would like to end on the fact that if I was made the MP here, I am in a position to be able to move into the area very, very quickly. So I would live in the area very soon.
Claire Malcomson, thank you very much for taking part in our interview today. So that concludes our interview with Claire. Coming up at 5:30 today, so not long, enough time to go and get yourself a cuppa and maybe make a sandwich. We have Anna Firth from the Conservative Party coming up next. And then at 7:30 p.m, we have Rosie Duffield from the Labour Party. And just before you go to make that sandwich, I'd like to just say a big thank you to Advision TV, who have put on this amazing production for us. Bow Concept, beautiful furniture company in Canterbury, who have helped us build our set today, and Orbital Internet Group, who have supported us with the technical side of things, including the blazing fast internet that we've been able to deliver this live stream to you today on. I'd also like to just say a massive thank you to a few people personally, and that's Matthew, Alex, Joe, Sam and Diana. So until 5:30, I will see you then.